So good morning again. This is the third quarter South Carolina Broadband Advisory Council meeting. We're live in Columbia at the Office of Regulatory Staff, and I know we also have a bunch of virtual participants as well. So thank you all for joining and taking time. We have quite a bit of information to share. And Melanie, I see you? Are you good to go on? Can you hear okay? Audio-wise? Perfect. Okay, thank you. We're going to go ahead. I'm going to start. I'll go around the room and just do quick introductions here in the room. And for the Broadband Advisory Council participants that are virtual, I'll just ask that everybody says hello really quickly for the crowd. But Mr. Huff, could we start with you?
Yeah, Larry Huff, Department of Education.
Gwyneth Nelson, South Carolina Institutes of Innovation and Information, SCIII.
Willie Bradley, SCIII.
Nabil Matabji, faculty member, University of South Carolina.
Sarah Pincelli, Department of Admin and Digital Equity Office.
Howard Fenton, South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs.
Mauricio Rosco, South Carolina Commission for Minority Affairs.
Brad Wright, I represent the South Carolina Telephone Coalition.
Elaine Whitfield, Bisbee.
Madeline McGee, I'm with the State Network for Nonprofit Leaders called Together South Carolina.
Peggy McLean, Department of Commerce.
Anna Berger, South Carolina Association of Counties.
Julie Moreland, Bisbee.
Mike Shealy, Department of Administration.
Look at everybody. I'm Jim Stritzinger, the Director of the South Carolina Broadband Office. Quick check-in. Can you all see the cover slide? Okay, perfect. Okay, and then could I just ask the Broadband Advisory Council members that are on the phone, could you just quickly say hello? Mike Cowick, I see you.
Thank you. Sorry to be late a little bit. Good to be here with the co-ops.
Thank you so much, Mike. And then Melanie?
Melanie Barton, Office of the Governor.
Thank you so much. Mr. Buds?
Buds, Municipal Association of South Carolina.
Perfect. Susie Shannon, I think I saw you.
Yes, Susie Shannon, South Carolina Council on Competitiveness. Hello.
Hello, hello. Anybody else?
Bernie Mazik, South Carolina Association for Community Economic Development.
Hey, Bernie, thanks for joining.
Trying to get there in person, but held up in traffic.
Understand.
You got Matt Hyatt, Palmetto Care Connections.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate you joining. And I think we got everybody. If not, please shout out, but we're going to dig right in. We have a lot of information to cover today. Some of it are some update information, and we've done our roll call. I want to make sure, just real quickly, for the Broadband Advisory Council members, did you have a chance to review the minutes? Could I have a motion to approve minutes from our April meeting?
So moved.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Any corrections necessary for that? Okay, just have a quick vote. How many approved just the minutes, and we'll get them posted publicly?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much. All right, got that quick business out of the way. We have some very special visitors in the room today, and one of the it's probably better to do some reintroductions once we change our session, but we wanted to spend a lot of time. I think everybody knows we've been doing a lot of planning work leading into what's known as the BEAD investments and the digital equity investments, which included a roadshow all around the state and incredible amount of survey collection. So want to spend the bulk of today talking about results of that activity and giving a readout for members of the public, because it's an incredibly impressive amount of work that was done, and we'll save that for kind of part 3 of our agenda. First thing I wanted to do is just give an update for everybody on sort of the broadband office stuff. We have we've updated all of the maps for the state of South Carolina. They went live on June 26th. We call these our March maps. They're really reflective of infrastructure that was built through December of 2022 in combination with Ookla data that came in through March 31. So that's why we call them the March maps and the September maps. That's our annual or biannual map production. This was a really important body of work for the broadband office for a lot of reasons, but most notably is it became the eligibility map for the grant round that we were working on. So let me start. There's some details I wanted to share with everybody. One thing is this map is rendered based on location level data. So the Federal Communications Commission has moved to what are called broadband serviceable locations. Think of it simply as street addresses. So this map looks familiar, but it's rendered, or the calculations are all done at a location level for the first time ever in state history. So we're extremely proud of this. I'm incredibly proud of my team for being able to pull this off because it's incredibly technically complicated. As you remember we call this the majority best available technology map now because we're looking at the majority of locations inside a census block. What kind of technology do they have? So the black areas on the map show us where we have fiber in the state. The blue areas on the map show us where we have cable in the state at a location level. And the copper colored areas, that's still where we have DSL, the digital subscriber lines. And the thing that always breaks my heart are the pink areas, because these are the places where the majority of the residents do not have an internet service provider. So you notice probably the last time you looked at this map, there was less pink. And that's because we're now zoomed in at the location level and paying a lot more attention. So that's a big deal. One of the things strategically that we did in the state of South Carolina, as you probably heard me say 100 times, the federal designation for broadband is 25 megabits per second down, 3 megabits per second up, and download speed and upload speed. We have shifted what I call into second gear in South Carolina. We're no longer just focused on 25.3. We've raised the bar to 100/20. So all of the analysis now is a much richer. We don't want a resident to just have 25.3 and call it a day with an obvious acknowledgement that we have a historic amount of money. One time, it'll never happen in any of our lifetimes again to get the state right. We are measuring the state at 100/20, and this is what the map looks like. The places that are green on the map are where we have the majority of those residents, actually 90% or greater of the residents in the green areas all have 120 or better. It's a 90% threshold now. And so the map is still kind of rendered the same way. Remember I taught you all to find the freckles. The freckles are where there's a lot of homes and they don't have good quality service. It's still rendered the same way, but the base data is location level data now. So we're accurate. So I drew your attention to the left side, the legend. We're now looking at 100/20 as the standard. And that keeps, you can tell there's a lot of geography out there that needs some work, and we're after it right now. Here's the same thing. This is what we call our planning map. These are where you can see the places where we've made investments. So the yellow areas are places that the state is in charge of. Those are state managed investments. The blue areas are where other federal agencies are in charge of those. That could be the Federal Communications Commission or USDA. So the blue are places where the federal government is also making investments. Of course, we have to pay careful attention to that so we don't step on each other's feet. But also the aqua areas, those are where private investment is also occurring, and we're trying to manage all of that. So the goal is not to waste a penny of anything and we don't want to step on anybody's feet. We don't want to blow up each other's projects. So the mapping work that my team does to manage this in the background is extraordinary, I will tell you. And it's really, really hard to do, but they are doing a great job. Okay, I'm gonna pull some numbers up just so everybody can see. So again, I draw your attention to the fact that we're now measuring the state at 100/20. Okay, so for those of you that are paying attention to the numbers, guess what? Our numbers went up because of the fact that it used to be 25.3, and now we're doing 100, so we've raised the bar. So our numbers went up a little bit, and you'll notice that our terminology has shifted a little bit as well. We're now, all the Broadband Advisory Council members need to know this. BSL, broadband serviceable location. That's the federal lingo. And so we're measuring everything that way. I won't get into all of the details, but I'm going to start here, this 191,000 number. That's the number of broadband serviceable locations that we think are currently missing service as of March 31st. The good news is, if you follow this down, here are the investments that we've made. So we've made investments that should solve approximately 58,000 of those homes. And when that construction is complete, we can now project forward and we can say that, well, all of these projects are December 2024, but when that work is done, we're projecting now that approximately 133,000 broadband serviceable locations, residential, will be lacking service as of December 2024. So this is our, I refer to this as our broadband general ledger. As we make investments, these numbers update real time, and we have all of that information on the back end. So this is really cool. I don't know any other state that has this capability, so we're extremely proud of it. I will, since we have our Chief of Staff for the Department of Ed, we want to pay attention to our public school students. So here's how you read this. So approximately, we think right now, approximately 31,000 public school students are lacking internet in their homes. We've made investments that should solve 16,000 of those. Roughly 50% of those have been covered. And that results in, we still have about 14,000 residents. But you can tell that our prioritization, we have all of the street addresses for every public school student, and that's where we're prioritizing investment. It's working.
Would it be possible to do a separate map for that?
It is, and we have all counties are mapped. All 46 counties have this statistics. So, but if there's any questions there, you can feel free to shoot me an email. But we've been through this a couple times. Here's how you get the maps: South Carolina Digital Drive. They're all there and they're available for download. And in particular, they're available for download in PowerPoint format. And that is so you can grab a slide, drop it in your deck, and, Mr. Huff, you can do a presentation to your board members tomorrow if you had to, because now you're an expert. So,
Jim,
yes, sir.
quick question. So earlier you mentioned there are certain parts of the state covered by different entities, the state, federal government, and private. And you probably are doing this, but I think it's important to understand, how are we assured that there's coordination to make sure that all the areas are covered, depending that it doesn't matter whether it's covered by state, federal, or private?
Yep. Great question, Bernie. And so I bounced back to the planning map, and we are paying location level attention to all of the federal investments. So we have location information from our federal partners at the FCC. We have location level information from our federal partners at USDA. We render that. This map is actually a location level rendering, Bernie. As soon as construction is complete and becomes verified, the blues and the yellows and the aquas will all turn to green. So that's the thing to think about. When you see this map, everything that's blue or yellow or green will be, or blue, yellow, or aqua, will be flipping to green when they're complete. So it's a combination of collecting real-time data from the internet service providers. So we will be getting a fresh batch of data in from the internet service providers to see what they've built. And the map will update itself real time. But Bernie, we're not going to miss a single home. Did I answer your question okay?
Yes. And it was just, I assume that everyone is, all the agencies and entities are cooperating, and everyone is working together to make sure that all parts of South Carolina are covered.
I can assure you the collaboration is extraordinary. So really good stuff. Matt, did you have a question?
I do, and I apologize if you've said this already, but when looking at the maps and you know a particular area shows as lit, does that mean that it is to the the person's door availability, or is there just fiber or whatever in that area?
That means the homes, 90% of the broadband serviceable locations, and if it's green, like on this map we're staring at right now, if 90% of the homes have access, that doesn't mean that they've signed up for service, right? The big access versus adoption, we still have challenges with affordability. We still have challenges, but if those residents were to pick up the phone and call and ask for internet service, they can get it.
Okay, that was what I was wondering. Okay, all right, thank you.
So that's a great question. This is an access map, not an adoption map, okay?
Jim, there are a couple of places where it looks like the service really follows county lines, particularly sort of northern or inland Dorchester County and Horry County. Why would it be specific to those two very green areas be more driven by county lines as opposed to other issues?
So the question is, does internet follow county lines? In some cases it does. Madeline, there are some cases franchise agreements with the provider, which limit them to a county boundary, so you'll see that. In some cases, the heritage of our rural telephone system, there's what's known as an ILEC area, an incumbent local exchange carrier that would have a service territory for a county. But a lot of those boundaries, of course, the county boundaries are kind of artificial right now. Right. And they're getting overbuilt routinely, and we're seeing a lot of that happen. But yes, you do sometimes see the edge of the county where it is a differential. But it's just kind of the historic.
We were serving Colleton County.
Yeah.
It used to go up into.
Well, no, they have, you can see the green, that's all that one provider is going into Bamberg County. Yep, they absolutely are. I'm sorry?
They jumped the line.
They jumped the line, sure did. And that's really how networks are built, Madeline, is they edge out, they call it edging out from where they currently are to where they want to go. You can't just kind of parachute in and turn on internet service. You really have to edge out existing technology and extend from where you already are. Great questions. Thank you all. All right, I'm gonna dig into the money real quick and try to move through this. This is a repeat slide, but I want to go back to May of 2022, and the South Carolina General Assembly allocated $400 million to the broadband office to do what we're doing now, is make investments. You know, the job of the broadband office, again, is to make investments in internet providers, and then they do the work. So we don't actually connect homes, but we manage the grant, the competitive grant process on behalf of the state. So there's two amounts of money. There's the State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. We call that SLFRF. You'll see that nomenclature. And we also have the Capital Projects Fund. We call that CPF. You'll see that as we go through. Two different dollar amounts, and I'll touch on those in a minute. First of all, midnight last night was the end of the grant application process. So my team is busy tallying up all of the grants that came in. It's an incredibly complicated process to go through and document all of that stuff. So I'm not prepared today to tell you how many ISPs and how many grants and how many dollars. We'll be fleshing that out over the next couple days. But this is a capital projects fund grant round. So we are beginning to allocate a piece of that 185 million. That's what we're talking about. So we spoke about this earlier, priorities for K-12 student census blocks, difficult development areas, which is U.S. Housing and Urban Development has the really challenged geographies in the state. The pink areas, you remember, with no internet service provider, those are big time priorities. And lastly, we prioritize the remaining Main Street communities. Believe it or not, I was surprised in a really cool way. Because of the investments we did in January, there's only 2 municipalities in the whole state that do not have an investment. So we have pretty much completed municipal build-outs in the state of South Carolina, or they're in production right now. So we did find the remaining two main streets. Those are Norway, Municipality of Norway, and Ridge Spring are the only two remaining. So we're going to solve them in this grant round, and that's an extraordinary accomplishment. So it'll be exciting to see those unfold, and each one of those is a really cool story in and of itself. But one of the things about Capital Projects Fund, it's a little bit different, and this is really kind of a nod, is it requires 100 meg symmetric construction. So state and local fiscal recovery fund only required 100/20. Capital Projects Fund requires 100. And this is just one of the, honestly, thousands of differences that we're having to figure out with the federal funding. It's incredibly complicated to manage all of the moving parts and the details of these different grant programs. This is what calendar year 2023 looks like for my team. As you can kind of see on February 2nd, we wrapped up our state and local fiscal recovery fund grant process. We opened up a new one right on top of that. We call that the Accelerated Deployment Grant Program. We've gone through the evaluations on all of that stuff. That was really, the General Assembly asked us to take a look backwards. Since they allocated the money in May of 2022, they said, they instructed the broadband office to look backwards and take care of the internet providers that had been building network from the time money was allocated to the state until June 30 of 2022. So this was actually very challenging for my team to work through, is to look backwards in time, figure out what was unserved at that time, because we can't pay for a project that overbuilds somebody else. That was tricky in and of itself. And then we had to make sure we didn't already pay for it before. So when you do all of the analysis to figure out which portions of which networks were built during that time, it was an incredibly tedious process to do. But we think we've crossed that bridge. And then, of course, we're in the middle of this CPF grant round. So I guess the takeaway on this slide is that we're going to be awarding, by the end of November is our goal to award all of the capital projects fund. The applications came in yesterday. We should have them all in production by the end of November. Or building out. So some details. We've analyzed the accelerated deployment. We had about $25 million worth of projects for the accelerated deployment across 10 different ISPs. We will be providing a 50% match on those projects, which is great. And just from a geography perspective, there was work done in 25 counties. So again, this is work that's already done. Construction's complete. Those customers are functional. We're just kind of, doing some grant awards to reimburse them for work that was done. Really, we're in the stage where we're doing financial review right now. So we look at every invoice that comes in to make sure it's an eligible expense for a project. Like you can't buy a dump truck and get reimbursed for that. It has to be actual infrastructure built along the way. So this is a chance for me to give a shout out to our extraordinary finance team that does audits on all of these. Yes, Peggy.
What's the capacities of the ISPs to get all this work done? Are they working continually and doing it?
They are. Many of them have beefed up their teams with short-term contractors coming in. But one of the reasons we made the decision we did to expand the geography, to change the bar to 100/20, is it physically opened up more geography in the state. And the way that you solve an elephant of a problem is you have multiple entities working at the same time without stepping on each other's feet. So the more internet service providers that we can have going in parallel without messing up each other, the faster we get the state done. So that's been our approach to the whole thing. It's a massively parallel operation instead of 1, 2, 3. I just put a couple of footnotes here. We will be awarding the a portion of the 185.8 capital projects fund. The amount of that is unknown at this time, but that's kind of a recap. A staggering slide. So some of you heard the public announcement. President Biden on June 26th announced, it was known as, they kind of affectionately call it allocation day. So for quite a while, there had been a formula out there for how the $42.5 billion would be allocated across all 50 states and US territories. That formula has been known for 2 years, and we all been waiting for the day to come, and the day finally came on June 26th. And the state of South Carolina received an allocation for $551,535,983.05 on June 26th, 2020, or this 2023. So look at the total, the broadband office. And, you know, to think about July 1st, 2021 was the first day. So in less than 2 years, the broadband office went from $30 million grant with our friends at Department of Commerce and a little bit of CARES Act money. Those first two, the 16 and the 30, were the dollars and cents we were working with. And now all of a sudden we have this staggering amount of investment money that has to be deployed. Every single one of these dollars has to be deployed, by the way, by March of 2025. To put it into perspective. So it is a massive undertaking. You know, we have a lot of strategic planning to do. That's why we're really going to switch gears and talk about some of that stuff. I did, let's see.
Jim,
Yes, sir.
before you go on, now with this allocation based on formula, that's allocation from what bucket of funding?
That comes from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also known as IIJA. Bernie, are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay, that's where that comes from. And it was allocated through the U.S. Department of Commerce / NTIA.
Okay, thank you.
That's the connection. Good question. So that's dollars and cents. That's what we're looking at. A little bit of timeline, just to, you know, to get the 551 million is a formula fund. We don't have those dollars yet. In order for us to get those dollars, we have to complete federal planning and get all the approvals done and all of that kind of stuff. So I don't want anybody to think that there's 551 million in the bank waiting for us to allocate. It's not there yet. And we have to do a really good job of these three things on the screen to make those funds become available. So I've shared this before. The 5-year action plan is currently in process. The state has hired Ernst & Young as our contractor to work with us on the 5-year action plan. And that is due to the federal government, specifically NTIA, by August 28th. There are a couple of elements we'll talk more about in a minute, but that is a deadline. The digital equity plan, as it's currently stated, was had 1 year from the date funds came out, so we have until November 30th to do that, and that is open for a little bit of extension, so that day may change, but that's at least the way it currently stands, unless there's something else I don't know about. And then the initial proposal, this is really part 2, if you will, of BEAD planning. It's a combination of the 5-year action plan and the initial proposal. The initial proposal is a very complicated piece of federal planning work, and that's due on December 27th this year. We have to pretty much describe our strategy for how we're going to deploy the $551 million. A very tactical look at how the money will be deployed. And we have some very interesting opportunities in the state of South Carolina. We, of course, we're going to connect every residential home And we certainly have enough financial resources. We also think we have enough financial resources with this $1 billion to reach some very strategically important community anchor institutions. You're going to hear a lot about that over the next couple of years. We can really make some things happen for the state. So any questions on this slide? I just wanted to touch on those 3 very important documents that are slated for this year. I do have just a timeline slide so you can kind of see how this stuff slots in. Allocation day, as I referred to with President Biden's announcement on the 26th, was really important because that started a 180-day shot clock. And that's what predicated the December 27th date. Was as soon as that allocation occurred, that started that 180 days clicking. And that's the initial proposal is due on December 27th. And we also have a goal to get I call it the Cliff Notes version. The initial proposal and the 5-year action plan together will be probably north of 300 pages. It's way too much for average human to consume. So we're going to distill that down into a Reader's Digest version that would have all the key articulations in it. And we want to get that in front of the General Assembly in the first quarter next year. So for the legislative session coming in. So that is that stuff. And let's switch gears one more time. Whoops. And I'm going to ask my friends Mike and Sarah to, in a very important part of the BEAD planning process was this thing we've affectionately called the roadshow. And we had a lot of planning work in the first quarter to kind of set the locations. And Sarah and Mike, do you guys want to comment on that activity?
Sarah's done a lot of hard work. What I'm going to say is I have been as far west as Seneca. I've been as far north as Rock Hill, as far east as Georgetown, and I think I've been as far south maybe as Beaufort. And I know I've gone a lot of places because a couple of weeks ago I brought my car in for servicing. I had to buy 4 new tires. So we have been across the state. We've had the venues, as you can see from the various meetings, and I learned a lot. I listened a lot, and there were several things, big picture trends that came as a result of listening. Number one is you may have an ISP in your area, but the wire or the fiber stops at a certain location, and just across the street, people want it and they can't get it. We heard that repeatedly, and then we heard stories about my son is going to tech school and he has to do part of his work from home, and he can't do it, and he has to go to the library. Sometimes he has to show up in the McDonald's and sit in the parking lot because they have free Wi-Fi. Those kinds of things. So that's one part of it. The other part that we heard, and this came, I think, primarily from educators, and it was in areas that were suburban or urban. I've got kids in my classroom that don't have access because they can't afford it. So those were the 2 important takeaways that I heard, and I'm going to defer to Sarah on what she heard. Because we had to tag team. She went in certain places, and then I would go to other places.
Yeah, so Mike really touched on a lot of the things that we heard. The biggest were access and affordability across the whole trip. And I'm excited to talk more about the survey because I think that was reflected there as well. But just to kind of get a little bit more detail on our actual roadshow event, it was a huge collaborative effort between our office and ORS. ORS did the heavy lifting of scheduling 15 roadshow meetings. If you want to see the exact counties we visited, you can go to getconnectedsc.org because I will save y'all time from reading a list. And as Mike touched on, we went to many different locations. We were at churches, libraries, tech schools. I guess the biggest picture is at the Disabled American Veterans Clubhouse, that was one of the livelier meetings, which was a surprise. And we got to talk to all sorts of people. We also had some internet service providers that came, and that also provided a lot of great dialogue because residents could actually talk to people that they sometimes had issues with or wanted to learn more from. A big component also was ORS had some of their team members, that members of the community after the meeting was over could come talk to them and see what was already in their area as far as infrastructure or what was coming, and then gave them numbers to call, help get more information. So our biggest thing was we wanted to make sure that all the members across the state felt like they were being heard, but we were also giving them information of, hey, this is what's coming. We're here to help. It was a huge collaborative effort. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of miles. And now we've got an amazing amount of information to go back into our plans. And then I want to mention, CMA helped set up a bunch of outside of our roadshow. We still had other events and they helped us. I think we went to Powwow, the Mexican consulate event. So there were some outside of the 15 county roadshow. So, it was really important and I just can't wait to see as it continues to come together. But it was a huge effort between everybody, but we all had a lot of fun along the way. And I wish Hank was still in here because he was integral in making sure he found out the best lunch spots to go in these afterwards, and he did a great job at that too. So
Yeah, it's a really neat event, and I'm gonna invite Julie and Nabil. We're gonna switch seats with you guys. And we want to and Julie, you can drive the slides.
Okay.
There you go. Larry, would you mind?
Yes, of course.
And then, get the.
Yeah.
Thank you. There we go. Then could you guys reintroduce yourselves, just so,
Sure.
and to the camera especially, so everybody
Okay.
knows.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Moreland. I'm CEO of Visby, and we were the partner really with the ORS and the B team to collaborate with a lot of different entities in this room, and especially with the USC, the BO here on designing, deploying, analyzing, and then reporting back on the residential survey results.
Awesome. Well, hello again, Nabil Natavji, an assistant professor and associate director of the patient engagement study at the University of South Carolina. Kind of our aim was to spearhead the efforts with Visby to design and conduct and analyze the data coming out from the survey. So at USC, we were also kind of a large interdisciplinary team of various professions and expertise, School of Public Health, School of Medicine, and School of Education, kind of align our various expertise into the survey design and development.
So, thank you guys. And I just have a little, we have an incredible team here, and I'm counting on my co-chair to ask some questions so we can have a rich dialogue around this. But we had to do a number of things, Julie, right? We had to design a survey, so the survey had to be designed. We had to implement the survey, right? Do all the collection, and a lot of people in the room actually collected the survey. And then once all the surveys come in, we got to analyze it on the back end. So there were a lot of extraordinary talent here, and I'll let you guys tell everybody how you did it.
Sure. And timing wise, what would you like for us to be shooting for?
Got a roughly 50 minutes.
15?
50.
Oh, 50. Okay. Pressure's not nearly as because originally it was 20. I was like, okay, so we're down to 15. Let's go. Let's go. So what Nabil and I are gonna walk you guys through is, what did we do? How did we do it? What did we find? And then what's next? And at the end, I'd love to interject a little bit, hot off the press tomorrow. We've got some stats on the business organization survey that are relevant to what we found with the residents. So hopefully we'll have a time to hit that just a little bit. What were our objectives? It's really to feed this 5-year plan. So to go out and get the evidence to insert into the 5-year plan so that we can show that the dollars that are coming to the state are actually being spent in the places that they need to be spent. So we call them the unserved communities. And we had to provide the design and the execution and everything that we just mentioned. But very important component of this is you think if we're going after the unserved, they're not on digital. So just having a QR code to scan in and go to a survey is not helpful. So a huge part of this was designing it for paper and then getting that English and Spanish out to the communities. And a lot of the people, on the phone today and in the room were instrumental in the road shows and Together South Carolina, all these different groups coming together in the counties and municipalities. So that was a huge component of it. We even created an IVR system. So if you didn't even have the ability to get to one of these road shows, you could just call and order a paper survey to be sent to you. So here's some of the key partners up here there's over 22 of them. So they're not all on here, but many of you guys are in the room with the SCIII, and we worked a lot with Clemson on the areas when it came to farming for people that were running a farm from their home. So lots of folks, Commission of Minority Affairs, that were instrumental in us designing the survey. Our approach was to identify 4 target groups, and basically at a high level, they have something or they don't have anything, or maybe they can only access it via their phone. So those 2 big buckets, and then we broke it down underneath there is, if they have something, is it meeting their needs? And then if they don't have anything, do they want it? And there's a very, very teeny tiny, like 2% of the people who said, don't have it, don't need it, which you would expect. And so we zeroed in on this unserved group is they have something, it doesn't meet their needs, or they don't have anything and they really need it. And that was about 48% of our sample size. So we were thrilled that we didn't just hear from a bunch of people that have what they need and they just want to fill out the survey for us. So good sample. And then the different domain areas that we looked at, barriers to access, was it cost? Was it access? Was it, there's no ISP in the area? What were the reasons that were keeping them from getting it? We looked a lot around household composition, different things of disabled person in the home, senior person in the home, breaking it down of, who's making up that household. And then we looked at what do they need the internet for? Is it K-12? Is it work from home? Is it running a business from the home? Is it accessing healthcare services? And one of the things, and Bill's going to show you the numbers, but I was frankly a little bit surprised. I thought it was going to be K-12 heavy. It ended up being healthcare heavy. And I don't know, I just have a theory of, everybody went back to school. Everything opened back up. So maybe by the time we did the survey that the needs had kind of shifted a little bit more toward healthcare. Let's see. And then one of the things that was really important to us is we have to make the survey engaging. So if you guys have ever taken a survey and you're 3, 4, 5, 10 questions in, and then you've got something else sitting there waiting for you to do, most people abandon it and they don't finish. So we had to do something to really engage people and get them through. And we used technology that Visby developed out of Charleston, South Carolina, and we actually patented it many years ago. It's a digital way for people to express something subjective, like a mood, a feeling, some other experience. And we made that the very first question after zip code, because we wanted people to see something they'd never seen before. They're like, oh, that's different. It looks like an emoji, but it's actually capturing scientifically what they're feeling, and very importantly, how intensely are they feeling it. And then the other thing that we did is a few points in the survey. Here's an example, would say, keep going, you're halfway through, so that they didn't sit there in their mind thinking, how much longer is this going to go? So we kept enticing them to keep going by using that. So the combination of making the survey engaging, and then the RIGS partners, really fantastic branding, marketing, this launch event that happened, was very, very high visibility. And then you take that along with the roadshow, the marketing campaign. We created QR codes to make it easier for people. I mentioned the paper earlier. The goal was, regardless of whether you English, Spanish speaking, you're 70 years old, you know, living in a nursing facility, or you're out on a farm in a rural area, the survey was accessible to you and however you needed to be able to take it. And here's some great photos. You know, Mike and Sarah have shown some of these. One thing that I forgot to send you, Nabil, over the weekend is the great photo we have of the Citadel cadets. So once we realized a lot of people wanted to take this on paper, which was really a surprise, we thought, you know, they'll say that's nice, but I'll get on my son's phone, or, you know, they'll still take it digitally. Lots and lots of paper. So then we have this dilemma of how do we get them into the system? So I went to the Citadel and they agreed to take cadets, and they could work off either disciplinary time. In the end, some of them we had to pay them, you know, to come in because they'd worked off all of their hours. And they're like, now I don't really have a reason to be here unless you're going to pay me and feed me lunch. But they were fantastic. And I wish we had taped a couple of the comments toward the end of how proud they were to have participated in it. So we'd show them the video that Riggs built to kind of get them engaged. And this is not just a piece of paper that you're looking at. This is a human took the time to fill this out because they wanted to be heard. So we kind of set the stage for the board of sitting there for hours just manually, that it was important to them. And they did a fantastic job.
Hey, Julie, before
Yeah.
you leave that, I know SCIII, you guys took on the mission of collecting paper surveys, and also Commission for Minority Affairs. You all did the heavy lift on the survey. So just take a moment and ask about your experience of collecting the paper surveys, because it wasn't easy to do.
It was not. We had the 7 HBCUs to actually collaborate with us. And we had more that participated than others, but it was interesting because it was a lot of the rural areas that actually participated with the paper surveys. And so we used volunteers. We had several events at several of the HBCUs. The students were more apt to do the QR code, whereas the older audience in the community, at churches, at fraternity and sorority meetings, they were more apt to do the surveys. And you were right, a lot of them just wanted to be heard. They were very enthusiastic about taking this survey once we explained to them the importance of it. So
at our school, we set up in the cafeteria and at South Carolina State University. And being a professor there, my day is depending on internet because I work in a recording studio. And my last year there, I was teaching a couple classes online on Blackboard, and it was awful because a lot of the times the infrastructure at school, the internet was down, and I couldn't get my work done. And neither could the students, and they were frustrated because I still wanted my assignments and by any means necessary, but they just I couldn't understand that. I couldn't understand that, so I took a personal interest in taking the surveys, and we got our school to send the survey out to the students via constant contact. Everybody at the school, the faculty, all the staff members there, all the students, and the alumni. We had parents that still live in South Carolina. They had them complete the paper survey, and that's how we were able to get a lot of this done.
It's amazing.
It was amazing to have those boxes, big boxes of surveys coming in.
And, you know, Dr. Fenton and Mauricio, I know you guys worked with the tribal communities and also our Spanish-speaking community, so.
Yes. The first thing that we found out pretty early that people didn't really want to do the QR-based survey, even if we had a tablet with us in the field. One of the reasons was because we were out in the field and, you know, not just in the roadshows, but in some of the events that we were canvassing all around the state, we had poor 5G or 4G or whatever. And so the survey took forever to go through the tablet itself. So we just started taking boxes of paper surveys with us. Well, sometimes we go to events where probably 90% of the people that are attending only speak Spanish. We came into the problem with, we would have the have internet survey in both English and Spanish. And we figured out that, we didn't have the other one, so we have to fill in information on the, write it in margins. I don't know how those were eventually processed.
We got,
Hopefully.
you guys were amazing and we got it done and the cadets were great about saying, I don't know what this means over here. What do you want me to do with it? So everything was manually audited and then put in so that we know it would be accurate.
Excellent.
And I imagine right now, we're talking just about the residential survey, because there's other surveys that.
There are.
Right. Are you guys gonna share kind of your overall response rate versus paper versus?
Yeah, and then, just before we leave that, did you have any last comments on like,
Mauricio went to more events than
Yeah.
anyone else at the agency. Maybe Brendan and Mauricio went to about the same amount of events, but.
you guys did amazing. I mean, we bow to you guys. Incredible lift to do it. And then you were even on Saturday at Main Street, Columbia, on
We've been there twice, I think.
setting up booth for Saturdays. And so my personal thanks, I know the state of South Carolina thanks you for the incredibly heavy lift and incredibly competent work that you guys did. So, and here's the results.
And here are the results. So actually, the results are just the outcome of every single engagement that you've all mentioned. And we are really very proud of this. I think this is really an very efficient and very high response rate that we've had, both in terms of the percentage-wise as well as the actual number that we've had. So if you look at the actual number, we've had over 18.5 thousand survey starters. And that kind of corresponds to a little less than 1% of all households in South Carolina. So that's really kind of capturing a lot of residential households in the state. Another thing that Visby and ourselves are really very proud of is the kind of completion rate and the individuals who were able to go throughout the survey and reach the very last question. Considerable. It wasn't we tried our best to kind of make it very user-friendly and time-wise not being very long, but also kind of trying to capture a lot of data that we needed to get. So those who were able to get to the very last question were 80% of the respondents. Again, I see percent complete rate, which is a little bit less, which is at 70.5%, but that's still very high. And that reflects the number of responses that completed all the questions that we determined a priori that they are required and key questions. Although we didn't force anyone to respond to all of the questions. But there were some questions like, do you have internet? Does it meet your needs? The household composition, that we said that they are kind of integral to our areas. You see the map of the county, at the county level where we have the response rates. You can see some of the higher response rates are from Orangeburg, Bamberg, Allendale, Hampton, Thursday, and other.
Yeah.
So Julie mentioned the 4 categories or 4 areas that we were trying to get into, or compartments or groups. So those who have internet and their internet is satisfactory, it meets their needs, which is green, and we love that, and we're curious to have that. That's around half of our sample, 45.6% exactly. But that wasn't our focus, although our focus was mostly on those who are having internet, but they're not satisfied with the internet that they have. They said that it doesn't meet their needs. That was around 1/4 of the sample. And the other quarter of the sample was those who doesn't have access to internet altogether. So they don't have internet at their household, or they can get internet at their household only via their cell services, their cell phone, via hotspots. And then they want the internet. And then the last category that also Julie mentioned is the smallest category is they don't have internet, but they said they don't want it, which is a little less than 4%. That would be interesting to kind of dig deeper and try to understand what their rationale there. So this is our focus. This is kind of an interesting map that I intentionally tried to kind of overlap with the maps that Jim showed earlier this morning, to show the underserved communities. And again, just kind of a reminder of our own definition of underserved is a little bit different, and those are the ones who have access to the internet, but it doesn't meet their needs as they self-prescribe. So you can see some of those counties. If you look at both maps, it overlaps with the areas where it's orange and Jim's BBO's office, which is kind of the access to DSL technology only. It's like Chesterfield, and Jasper only. If we move to the unserved, which are those who don't have internet at all at their household, again, it's kind of almost completely aligning with the pink areas that were shown earlier. Again, you can see very high rates of unserved communities in Allendale, Dillon, and some other surrounding counties here. So Julie mentioned the kind of the emoticons or the kind of the feelings and the slide bar where they can show their intensity about specific elements. One of the very first questions that were asked was the feeling about the internet connections at their home, irrespective whether they have internet or not. So even if they don't have internet, we're asking them about how do they feel about that option. And actually exactly 50% of the sample expressed that they're either frustrated or stressed. So they had some negative feelings about the internet availability, which is kind of goes back to the argument of access versus adoption. And we're gonna see some of the reasons about the barriers of what caused those reactions. And also on this slide, you can see some of the intensities of their reactions or their feelings about that. You can see that the intensity even goes higher among those who have a negative feeling about the internet service. So we wanted to dig deeper into the dive or the kind of the disparities between those who have internet and those who doesn't have internet, or they're underserved or unserved, basically. And as you may expect, you can see that the feelings just change. So obviously you have more people who are frustrated and stressed among the group that are unserved or underserved. So it just goes above 75%.
Bill, a quick comment before you leave that slide. Technically, the word underserved means less than 100/20. Unserved means less than 25/3. So there's a technical correlation. So I'm just connecting the dots for you on those.
Yeah. And kind of we're using them here based on what the individual would consider themselves, whether they have internet or not. It's not kind of an actual technical service at their house. So my background is in public health. I teach public health. I do research in public health, and we always hear about the disparities in healthcare services by race. That's across the states, across different states in the US, and it's very common. And it wasn't surprising that even in terms of access or adoption of internet services, it's kind of, again, mirrored in that area. You can see how various households with various racial and ethnic compositions have, unfortunately, various kind of access to whether they have internet meeting their needs or not even having access to it. So you can see that the American Indian and Alaskan Natives has the highest percentage of under or unserved, reaching 61.7%, followed by Black or African American, and the kind of most served in this survey were the Asian or Pacific Islander. One interesting thing that you can see on this slide also is the Hispanic Latino community has the highest percentage of those who doesn't have internet, although they might have a little less in terms of the underserved, but they have a larger percentage of unserved.
And I'll add another component here. We also found that the Hispanic Latino community registered much higher levels of frustration and stress by not having what they needed. So as a group, when they were asked, how is this impacting your life? They were more frequently registering stress and concern.
Again, kind of looking at the household makeup, another look at the various household makeup that we try to look at how people have internet or are underserved or unserved. We look whether they are living in a rural location, whether they have someone who's running a business or a farm from their home, whether they have pre-K to 12 education, school-age children, whether they have someone with a chronic illness, veterans, whether they're working remotely or senior citizens. And again, in those various household compositions, we see some variations, and they're ranked by order of highly unserved or underserved to the lowest by rank. So you can see, obviously, as you may have imagined, again, the data is showing us once again that those who are living in rural location are unfortunately at the higher end of being under or unserved. So you may start kind of wondering what are some of those barriers that have been causing those unmet needs. The number one kind of reason that came back in terms of unmet needs is not meeting personal needs in terms of speed and reliability. And the second one is it being too expensive to get the internet. Again, this is among those who have internet, but it's not meeting their needs. And this is kind of an interesting quote from one of the Bournemouth County residents that said, because I live in a rural area, the only option I have is for a Wi-Fi box, but I'm paying $125 per month. That doesn't work half the time with very slow speed. And she has a high school student that requires fastnet, and she herself, as a mother, is doing a BS degree online that requires internet. So now switching gears to those who doesn't have internet or who are unserved. Again, it's kind of similar barriers, but now the number one barrier is cost, which comes to the kind of the adoption issue with the digital equity element that we need probably to focus on. But then the second largest or the second common one is not having an ISP service provider in their location. And this slide just kind of, there were a large list of zip codes that mentioned that, and just listed on the slide are the top 13 zip codes indicating no ISP.
And I know this is self-reporting, but I mean, Jim, is there any way when they, when you look at those zip codes to know if in fact there is no ISP serving location, like there is no ISP available?
We can easily cross-connect it. We haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
But yes, definitely it correlates too. That's kind of the holy grail of digital equity and the blended work, right? Is you study the cross-connect between the infrastructure and these kind of responses. So
one of the things that we saw a lot in the paper surveys where people would handwrite in there is, this was actually surprising for us, is very few people reported that they don't feel safe, and weren't reporting that they don't know how. A lot of people would write in, no, my daughter will help me. I just need it. In other words, they're saying, give me access and I'll figure it out. So those digital equity initiatives to me are helping them learn how to use it, but they're not afraid to use it. They're not afraid of their security. I found that fascinating.
Again, on the same topic of kind of digital equity and our stereotypical kind of sometimes assumptions, sometimes you might think that some of those communities don't have access to internet because of lack of ID or bank accounts or credit history, etc. kind of things. But that's, again, if you look at those who said that, it's less than 8%. So it's more of a cost issue rather than some other elements, whether they don't have someone that would help them or they don't have the resources to get that.
I'm surprised that the not having a device was only 11%. Does that mean most of these people have a computer, or are they thinking television is the device or cell?
Smartphone could be a device.
Because this says cell only. They could have cell access here already, right? So they wanted internet for their cell phones, I see. Did you find many people that didn't have cell phones?
There was a decent percentage of the people who did filled out the paper surveys, that on the back, they would not check, that they have a smartphone in the house. but it wasn't a large percentage, so it did seem like it was more about they don't have access. They can get a smartphone or they can get some other device to get on if they had access.
Well, this is encouraging because really the only barrier is lack of service.
And, you know, the public schools have made huge investments in one-to-one programs. So a lot of cases, the student is bringing home their device from school. But something else I'll draw to everybody's attention is I've learned that just because you own a smartphone does not mean you have a data plan. Okay, so a lot of students have bought, you know, iPhones off of eBay just so that they can walk around and show their iPhone, but it only works on Wi-Fi.
Right.
And that's been an issue, and I'm sure you see that a lot in the schools, so.
The thing is that we can also differentiate between, so for the purposes of this high level results, we did lump sum the don't have internet and those who get internet only on their cell phone. But they are in our data set differentiated, so we can. Yep. So speaking about cost, you would assume that those who have cost issues could potentially benefit from the federal programs that are helping. But unfortunately, again, back to the kind of issue of not being familiar with those is a main barrier. So you can see that almost 3 out of 4 of those individuals weren't familiar about the federal programs that provide financial assistance for the families of these.
Nabil, really quickly on this slide, the broadband office did apply for a grant with the FCC on June 30th to do ACP announcements, you know, to get it out there and make it ACP outreach grant. So fingers crossed on that. We're hopeful we can have a.
We do see the providers certainly advertising it.
They're not everybody, but a lot of them have really leaned in on that, which has been great. But we're gonna really attack. We identified 8 counties that are underperforming in terms of participation, and we're gonna be very strategic about that. So.
Again, question.
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna say, I've already been hearing on the radio advertisements for ACP, at least on the local market.
Yeah.
So I don't know, if that's unconnected with the.
It's not due to what we're doing, but we're gonna do more of that, that kind of thing, make general public broadly aware of ACP.
We intentionally, when we were designing the survey, we intentionally wanted this survey also to provide resources. So as they were responding to this question, the actual question did indicate more information about what ACP is. But we asked them to respond to it first before they know what ACP is, but after that they kind of knew what ACP is. And some of them actually, when we were in the field, a lot of them, when I was doing it personally, they were asking about that and how they can get resources. So for example, I was writing the kind of full name on a piece of paper so that they can go back and ask for that.
Jim and others, so on this affordability issue, I'm thinking and wondering, in the planning for long-term affordability, is that part of the discussion as well? I know we're looking at ACP, but are we also in the planning process thinking about almost systematically or within systems, how do we make broadband affordable? It's just a question.
Yeah, Bernie, that's a great question, and I will just comment this way. Affordability is kind of part of every discussion we have. Everybody should know when a grant application comes in, each internet provider has to tell us what their affordability plan is. You know, what's the cost of monthly service with that grant? And they have to tell us how long they're gonna offer that. So if we're gonna invest big money to build a project, we wanna make sure that the net of that is the customer actually can afford. And of course, at the state level, we can't put everybody says, well, what dollars and cents are affordable? That's not for us to decide. That's not for state government to do. But we do know the general parameters of that. And that is a functional requirement, Bernie, of the initial proposal document. The state of South Carolina has to define what affordability is. And there are different dimensions. There are speed dimensions, you have to get a certain grade of service, you have to have low latency, you're not allowed to have data caps, things like that. So it's a multi-function list of what does affordability mean for the state of South Carolina. So when grants come in, we're making sure it's affordable. We're advertising ACP. Every internet service provider has to be eligible to offer the ACP, or they're not eligible for our programs. So we're requiring that stuff. Candidly, the ACP has a fixed amount of funding at the federal level, and Congress has to take that up. Because it is projected to run out of money sometime next year without some corrections. So that's something we're all paying careful attention to. But also through the lens of education and healthcare, I think there are some ways we can make some smart investments for South Carolina on the affordability side to make sure those in most need have internet service in their house. So, Bernie, did that help answer your question?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yeah, and of course that's the short term, and you've already mentioned the short-term investment that we can make through ACP. So I guess within the ISP applications, they're speaking to you, the broadband office, of the long-term affordability plan that they have. And I guess that's what I'm getting to. Also on the issue of devices and so forth, just thinking about the where that presently does not seem to be an issue with access through devices, kind of thinking through the lens, is that being provided, say, through schools that are providing those devices now? Will that be an ongoing solution? Are we looking at long-term solutions to make sure devices are there? I'm just thinking about the long-term affordability, because we're in a moment of abundance now. Where are we going to be 10 years from now to address these digital equity questions?
Yep.
This is Matt, can I respond a little bit to that?
Sure.
Hey, Bernie, from a hardware perspective and getting equipment out in the communities, Palmetto Care Connection serves primarily rural and underserved communities all across the state. And we, to date, have trained roughly 1,200 participants who, at the end of that session, got and received a device of some sort, whether it was a tablet or a PC. But we are actively working with local healthcare organizations and local businesses to receive donations back from them, refurbish those devices, and be able to hand out good quality devices in these communities. Our plan currently in our long-term mission is to continue to do that. So I know we're one small piece of the puzzle in that regard, and certainly won't be able to touch everybody that has a need. But we are trying to fill that gap in those rural and underserved communities through methods like that and other grant opportunities. Just to let you know and let the group know, that's kind of where we're working towards now.
And that's awesome, and that's the kind of thinking you all and other partners that can play that role, so that these are not barriers 10 years from now. But so thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yes, sir.
Actually, that's a great segue because, and I'll try to wrap up in a couple of slides, but the healthcare was one of the highest critical needs that were identified by our residential survey. So if you look at this survey, kind of also Julie alluded to this earlier, we had 4 key critical needs that we portrayed in our survey, and we were trying to get more information about them. They were access to healthcare services, supporting children in K-12 education, working from home, and running business from home as well, or running a business using internet services. And the highest was accessing healthcare services. And I guess this is a kind of a byproduct of COVID. and how people were forced to use healthcare services via telehealth and other remote patient monitoring services, and kind of they found it works, and potentially they wanted to continue doing it.
One last thing here too is a lot of people reported it was because of mobility issues. So they, just to get to a facility was very, very problematic because they either can't drive or there's some sort of disability. And there was a huge percentage of that were veteran, reported as being veteran, that fell into that group of needing healthcare.
As well as kind of tied back to the kind of rural element, that's an integral element of that.
This is Matt again, from, PCC. I want to touch on the healthcare side of it as well, to speak a little more on what you're talking about here in access. So as we continue to add that access, as we continue to deploy devices, we have also, PCC has also, through some FCC grants that we received, stood up a telehealth platform that will be free of charge to any healthcare provider across the state that wants to use it. That includes remote patient monitoring capability, synchronous telehealth video services, asynchronous type, education type material that they can push out to those patients. So in talking about, patients needing access to care, mobility being an issue, our plan is in these rural and underserved communities across the state to give those providers at no charge an opportunity to be part of a telehealth platform that will allow them to reach those patients. So hopefully with the connectivity, devices deployed through all the partners that are doing it, education, and then having this telehealth platform, we can close a lot of those gaps across, in particular in our rural and underserved areas.
And just quickly on the kind of those who have or who are underserved or unserved, unfortunately, the highest percentage of unserved or underserved are specifically among the groups of households that are supporting children in K-12 education for that area. And as you may imagine, for those who feel that they need the internet to support a kid in school, if we look at the differences between those who are having their needs met versus those who are unserved or underserved, you can see a vast differentiation between the amount of people who are comfortable or households that are comfortable with the success of their children. So the question was, how do you feel about your children's ability to be successful in their education, considering the current access to the internet at your household? Less than a quarter, less than out of four responded by being comfortable among those who are underserved or unserved, as in comparison to 3/4 among those who have internet.
We wanted to look at what is the lack of access doing for people from a health perspective? How much stress is it creating? So when you see something like this of nervous, 36% of these people said they're nervous. That's having an impact on their physical being, not just the fact that they can't wire into internet. So that was something that was important for us to kind of pull out of this data.
Okay, so again, this is the last slide, at least from our end. This is all of the data kind of already been shared, or at least most of the data was shared with EY's team and Jim's office, and kind of integrated into their 5-year action plan. But there's much more that we haven't been able to share with you today because of time constraints, and we're digging deeper into taking a deeper dive into the data. We have a lot of questions that can be answered both academically and have policy implications, both from an infrastructure point of view as well as a digital equity point of view. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Jim.
Yeah, and I think we've got for those that really want to dig in, you guys have a rich set of slides that we're going to include in the public deck, and survey design, lots of different things. So we're running out of time to have a chat today, but, you know, I want to just come back to saying thank you to everybody that made this possible. I mean, this happened very, very quickly. You know, on a rocket ride, it happened fast. I mean, procurement team at the state of South Carolina did extraordinary things to make these things happen, and you all brought incredible brain power to this and just embrace it. And you know, the work shows. So I think the state of South Carolina says thank you to everybody here for doing that. And any other questions? I know we're coming up on our time anyway. I didn't have anything further to share with the group. How about those that are online virtually? Any questions that we missed?
Yeah, Jim, this is Melanie. One of the questions I wanted to know is affordability is a big issue. Were any of the questions on the survey directed at what do you think is an affordable amount or a percentage of your income? Or because I think that's a big issue, especially for the providers and the families, is what is reasonable? How do you go about defining that?
So we did have a question about, I stopped sharing, I'm sorry. Let me try to.
That may not work.
So we did ask a few specific questions about household income, and we tried to get more into the affordability by asking them whether your need is not met because of costs. There was a subset of questions that are asking, would you be willing to pay more to get internet? Yes or no, and kind of there's an open-ended quotation to kind of elude more. This is kind of in the second round of analysis that we're gonna dig deeper to see what is the percentage of those who were willing to pay more. And I think from what I recall, the majority were willing to pay more if they get better or more stable internet, despite the costs that they're having. But that's kind of also, we're looking into more of the qualitative findings from the open-ended, which shows a lot about how much they're willing to pay and what is considered affordable for them. But again, this slide kind of shows you also the variation in how the unserved or underserved are feeling based on the household income. And as you may expect, those who are less than 30K are the ones with the largest needs for the internet.
Got it. Thank you.
And median family income in 2021 in South Carolina was $62,542. So that gives you an idea where the middle is.
Yeah.
Could you stop sharing? And thank you, Nabil. Any other questions from anybody?
I noticed the one lady in Barnwell, I think, said she paid $125 a month for subpar internet. That just seems exceedingly high. Have you guys found that in these more rural counties that have less access, that they're being hit with that kind of fee? I mean, that's double what I pay at my home in Greenville County for pretty blazing fast internet. So
Yeah.
it just seems exceedingly high.
The Affordable Connectivity Program offers a $30 monthly subsidy for a family to get internet service in their house. So the closer that an internet service provider gets to 30, that brings the cost down for an eligible family to 0, right? So it's not an accident that the top 20 internet service providers came together in the Rose Garden with President Biden and proclaimed that they would offer in the United States, you know, 100 meg, 100/20 service for $29.99, around $30. So the peer pressure for giving good service at an affordable rate is incredibly strong right now.
Good.
The pressure is there to get it. And we're requiring that when we say affordable, that's not just for an eligible family, that's for every family. Okay, so our requirement for eligibility, they're not allowed to have an income qualification for that. So that way, anybody that lives in that area can get the same cost. Now, that's not going to be gigabit service in your house. That's not going to be all the bells and whistles. But we're aiming to get everything at 100/20. That's the service level we want for affordability.
But to his question,
Are they currently charging more? Were there fewer
In
providers?
some cases, and I think, let me share it. Every internet service provider has had to create a business case to survive, right? And when you build a really expensive network with your own dollars in a remote rural area of the state, you have no guarantee on the number of customers that are going to subscribe, and you need that monthly recurring revenue to pay for maintenance. And I'll make this comment, it does the state no good for a network to go out of business. We don't always improve, by the way. If a ISP goes out of business, guess what? That shuts down a whole region of the state. That's a disaster from our perspective. So we have to, that's why we can't set a number. That's not for the state to set a number. It has to be tuned to the geography and the number of subscribers they're going to get. But as we invest money and as we bring public dollars in to build those networks, guess what? The trade-off is if we pay for it, you better be offering some affordability to the residents. So
And is there any kind of, you have to serve this area for X number of years?
they have to define that in their grant application. But again, it's really unenforceable for us to claim, 3 years out, you have to offer that same rate. So, but the peer pressure of having another ISP right next to you in the geography will keep things honest. So, or at least we hope it will.
And Jim, I guess when I talk about systems, that like, our group, our friend here, Palmetto, that's what I think we need to be thinking about now for the future. Who are the partners? Who are the allies that we can bring into this conversation about the provision of internet services that can ensure that the systems that we have and the ecosystem that we have ensures that broadband and internet is going to be accessible and affordable to everyone for the long term. And it may go beyond just where we are today at this table. It may go bring other players to the table.
And another word I'll introduce is reliable, right? And resilient. It does us no good in South Carolina to build networks that are going to go down in the first hurricane. So we have a lot of things to think about. Infrastructure is not easy. We're getting into it, but I think as we're drawing close on our time, Bernie, thanks for that comment. We've got the right team. We're building the right team. We've got a lot of serious brain power, in this room, on the phone, but, the extended group of stakeholders is very, very strong. So I think we're on the right path, y'all.
So, final question from me. For the Department of Commerce folks and people that have been around this state for a long time, the vast majority of this $1 billion is going to go into for-profit companies to pay for them to do the work. Right. How does that compare in terms of economic development incentive to the money we've been putting into all the other for-profit companies that we've recruited, in the business job creation and all of that? How does that number, this investment in that industry compared to what we put into the automotive industry? Because $1 billion is a huge number.
Well, the incentives that we put in for these, to benefit these for-profit entities goes into things that are going to remain should these companies leave. We're not giving it to the company. We're giving them water lines and sewer lines and roads and that type of
That's a
thing.
good point, yeah.
So that's where the money is going. It's not going, it will benefit that company that's creating the jobs and creating the tax base. So,
Is that the same case with the internet pipes? The fiber will be there if someone else takes over the service area?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, if they get acquired, for example.
wire's not going away.
It's not going away. That creates tax base for the county. I don't know if you knew that, but business personal property tax is paid for every mile of fiber. Brad, do you know that? Every mile of fiber that's in the ground creates tax base for that county. So it's a big lift. And the other thing we're trying to do, this is kind of a hidden agenda item, is to fix cell phone service at the same time. So if we get fiber in the right spots, we have what's called backhaul, which provisions the state for fixing cell phone service. So that all of this work is benefiting everybody. This is, we're truly raising the tide to lift all boats. So, cool. Well, y'all, we'll call it there. Thank you all for an incredible meeting. I think we had a lot of rich dialogue today, and we'll look forward. And I'll ask Nabil if you can hit the stop on the record button. Bye, everybody.
Bye.